This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
On the Track is a monthly web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy!
So what have we got exciting that's coming up in this episode, Mr. John?
Well, Hennis, in this week's episode, we're talking to Richard Freeman about his favourite subject, dragons.
I really like the old credits.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs, and welcome to another episode of What's Happening. It looks like we've been transported to the Isle of Man.
So, Jeff, the Centre for 14 Zoology is a very inclusive and diverse organisation, isn't it? I happen as it is. So, with that in mind, I was going to ask you, how do you view lesbian relationships? In high definition.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs, and welcome to another episode on the Track. And in the co-pilot seat today, it's the return of Miss Isabel. Hello, Miss Isabel.
Hello there.
What are you doing, Miss Isabel?
Oh, I'm just being surreal.
That's the only thing that a girl can possibly do. See you later, Miss Isabel. And in this episode, we're going to bring you a mixture, a melange, a multitude. I can't think of things beginning with M. Lauren, what begins with M?
Mustard, of course.
Of. Hard science, weird shit, and surreality. What's surreality, Miss Isabel?
Sitting on a cloud fishing.
That sounds like a very good thing to do. Actually, it sounds fun as well as being surreal. So, on with the show. So Richard, before we go any further, I know there are regional differences between the types of dragons described in the legends. Biggest difference being the difference between Oriental dragons and Western dragons. European dragons. But why do you think the basic form of these creatures is the same all over the world?
I think the basic form of the creature is the same all over the world is because people are encountering the same or very similar entities, and they've been encountering these entities since before civilization began.
Well, the big question here then is, do you think these entities are created by humanity, or are they something that pre-exists before? You know what I'm trying to say, something that
pre-exists humanity.
That predates, that's it. Do you think there's something that predates humanity?
There's arguments to be made for both, and it might be a case that it's not either or. The dragon is one of the great global monster archetype, which I've spoken about before. In cultures all over the world, you get the same kind of monsters repeated. Dragons, hairy giants, monstrous dogs, giant birds, little people, monstrous cats. And I theorise that these are all creatures that would have been preying on or in competition with our Australopithecine ancestors when they left the jungles of Africa a couple of million years ago and moved out onto the savannah, the plains, to exploit new food sources like carrion and stuff. They would have been preyed on by crocodiles and pythons, by birds like the martial eagle. They would have been hunted by leopards and lions and African wild dogs, and they would have been in competition with other primates, other types of Australopithecine, and giant baboons. And some of these primates would have been bigger than they are, and some of them would have been smaller than they are. So it's almost like the monster archetypes are a distorted echo, a fossil memory of the creatures we're in competition with, or that were directly preying with us on us a couple of million years ago. And one theory I had that is that some of these monsters, these archetypes, could be a subconscious gestalt global tulpa or thought form, in that the unconscious fears of our species collectively could create a solid, tangible monster that could appear for a while, terrorise an area, and then vanish again. And in my new book, The Highest Strangeness, I tackle this, and I look at this, and I look at what the mechanism might be to do this, the building blocks or cells that a monster would be built out of, that a thought form monster might have been built out of. And the other theory is that these things are transdimensional. They slip in and out of our reality. It's interesting that many cultures have things very similar to the global monster template, like Muslims believe in jinn, which are supposed to be creatures made from smokeless fire, which you could translate as energy. And they live in another reality, but sometimes they slip through into ours, or we slip through into theirs. And jinn can appear as dragons, monstrous apes, huge black dogs with red eyes, monstrous cats, huge birds. Ringing any bells? It's the same as my idea of the global monster template. And the Hindus have the Rakshasa, and this sort of thing is repeated throughout cultures all over the world. And theoretical physics has postulated something like 18 different dimensions. So could there be places or even conditions when these dimensions merge into one another, or you can walk from one into the other, and an entity or a creature from one reality can slip through into ours?
It's a very interesting idea, and I just had when you were talking about the global gestalt, it got me thinking for the words of A Christmas Carol, which goes, "The hopes and fears of all the years are met in thee tonight." And the idea of the hopes and the fears, everything that what humanity has wanted and everything humanity has been deathly scared of, all coalesce into something that has, at least partially, a objective reality.
And our ancestors, our Australopithecine ancestors, their main concern for the day would just be survival, surviving through to the next day, avoiding being eaten, finding enough food, getting out of the way of predators. So the idea of being devoured would be something that's constantly on their mind. We, in what we call civilized society, wherever you may be in the world, don't really have to worry about predators. We don't have to worry about being eaten by large carnivorous animals unless we go out into the wilds. But once upon a time, until relatively recently, this was a going concern. Up until medieval times, even in Europe.
Later, because wolves were allegedly preying on people in the 17th century in France.
Yes, well, there's a fallacy that wolves don't eat people, and they do. Wolves do kill and eat people, but it's usually under unusual circumstances, when their natural prey has been destroyed, or, of course, a rabid wolf will attack you. And then the beast of Gévaudan, which from 1764 to 1767 killed about 118 people in southern central France, and that was almost certainly a maneless male lion, because there was a big trade in exotic animals quite close, and there's a market for these quite close to Gévaudan, about 50 miles away, because at the time, pre-revolutionary France, a lot of the aristocracy had private menageries, and the beast of Gévaudan is only the most famous of a whole slew of other man-eating creatures that were recorded in France in the 16th, 17th, 18th and early 19th century. There was one from Limousin a few years after the Beast of Gévaudan, for instance. It's just that the Beast of Gévaudan is the one that became the most famous. And today in Africa, South America, parts of Australia, parts of Asia, there are man-eating animals around today. Gustav, the crocodile from Lake Tanganyika, has thought to have eaten at least 300 people in his career, and he's somewhere between 20 and 25 feet long, and there are other huge famous man-eating animals still roaming the earth today. So us sitting at home nice and safe, we don't have to think about that, but our ancestors were thinking about it all of the time, which would have fed into this terror, this fear that has come down the generations in our genes, our fossil memories of terrifying predatory creatures that now manifest as monsters from our own gestalt. And that's to say, they're not real, they're real in a different kind of a way. They can interact physically with the world around them. They're just not animals in the sense that we think of animals being animals.
And the fact, going back to predatory animals in Europe, the fact that there were wolf packs that could and did eat people was why people believed in things like the Beast of Gévaudan and the 18th century werewolf panics in Europe, because real wolves did kill and eat people rather than being something that only happened in storybooks.
And a rabid wolf would have been bolder, and it would have bitten people and passed on the rabies, which is where the curse of the werewolf may have had its genesis.
I wonder why wolfsbane was then supposed to be a cure for it.
No idea.
Because what you said then, I mean, it's even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night can become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the midsummer moon is bright.
And the autumn moon is bright.
Autumn moon,
yes.
Right.
But things like werewolves only transforming on the full moon and silver bullets and things, they added much later. A lot of it was from Hollywood.
Really? I thought it was Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen.
Well, that added to it as well. Jean Chastel was supposed to have killed the Beast of Gévaudan with a silver bullet, which he didn't. What he killed was a large wolf-dog hybrid, which wasn't the Beast of Gévaudan. The people that saw the carcass said, no, that wasn't the creature that attacked us, the ones that survived.
But it suited the narrative of those in charge to say that it was dead to stop people panicking, and also to say that it wasn't something that escaped from
Well, the king had already thought it was dead even before that, because his gun bearer had shot a particularly large wolf, and he thought that was the end of the Beast of Gévaudan, but the killings continued afterwards and he simply ignored them.
Well, I assume as well that the king did know that the writing was on the wall for the French aristocracy and monarchy, and didn't want the general public, the sans-culottes, to be even more angry with those in charge, because they had menageries full of animals which would escape and eat their children.
And we know that the Beast of Gévaudan wasn't a wolf because of its description and its modus operandi. It was as large as a donkey. It had a great broad muzzle full of sharp teeth. It had a long tail as thick as a man's arm with a tassel on its end. It roared. It used its claws as well as its teeth to kill prey, and it was said when it attacked cows it would leap up onto their back, pull them over and then throttle them to death, which is typical big cat. And one woman who tried to save her son, who had been grabbed by the beast, actually jumped up onto its back, and she said it was as big as a donkey. She could straddle its back, and she tried to make it let go of her son by squeezing its testicles, and the Beast of Gévaudan turned round and clawed her head and scalped her. Wolves don't do that. It would often tear the heads off its victims. It would roar, which wolves don't do. Another person that survived an attack from it lived the rest of his life as an imbecile because it had tried to throttle him and cut off the air supply. And he was saved, but he had brain damage. Another guy survived but bore the scars into old age. He lived well into his 80s, but he had the claw marks on it. So it was a lion. It was a subadult lion. But we've digressed massively from dragons.
But it is interesting, isn't it, as well, just to digress even further, if it was a subadult maneless lion, think of the other two most famous.
The man-eaters of Savo,
Yeah.
who are maneless.
I was just wondering, are there other accounts of maneless male lions being more vicious and more...
No, I mean, I've just written a book on man-eating animals, and most of them, the male man-eating lions had full manes, like any other lion. So it was just a coincidence, I think.
Well, it was the reason that the Roman Colosseum managers basically hunted the North African Barbary lions very close to extinction, was not just because they were lions that go and eat people in the arena, but because they had big, huge black manes and looked more terrifying. But, like you said, we've digressed massively onto something else. What I was going to do, I was going to give you two cases of dragons that I know that you and I, to a certain extent at least, have investigated both of them. One, to me, appears like it could have its genesis in a real creature, and the other is the exact opposite of that. I don't care which order you do them in, but first of all, the dragon that appeared at the end of last year at Waverley Abbey in Surrey, and two, the dragon that lived in St Leonard's Forest up until the year of Shakespeare's death.
Well, the Dragon of St Leonard's Forest, there was a pamphlet written about it at the time, and it lived in a place near Faygate in St Leonard's Forest, and it wasn't gigantic. It was about 9 feet long, and it was serpentine, and it was supposed to kill dogs and men by biting them with venom or casting forth venom. And it was said to feed on rabbits, or conies as they called them back then, from local rabbit warrens. And it was said that this creature was reddish in colour, and when anybody came near it, cows, dogs, people, it would rear its head up and look most arrogantly around it, which sounds exactly like a cobra rearing up in the threat posture. and it was said to have a swelling in the middle like a spindle, giving it a spindle shape, which sounds like when a snake has swallowed something and is digesting it, and it has the bulge in the middle. So this could well have been a exotic snake like a cobra that had been brought back to an early menagerie and escaped. And there are several stories like that, of animals that seem to have escaped from menageries. In the Tower of London they had all sorts of things, crocodiles, bears, lions, tigers, that were brought back a long time before we think of society having zoos as we would recognise them today. And there's a place called Wormingford that has a dragon legend attached to it, and the dragon sounds very like a crocodile. There's no talk of fiery breath or wings. It's a great beast with huge jaws and saw-like teeth and a long tail and 4 legs with claws that were covered over in armour that arrows couldn't penetrate, and it was supposed to have killed and eaten men and livestock, and it hung around the swamps in Wormingford until winter, when it vanished. And of course, if that was a crocodile, it would have died in winter. So it sounds very much like a crocodile to me, a flesh and blood animal, not a true dragon.
With the St Leonard's dragon, how many species of cobra are there that get to that size? I was thinking particularly the king cobra.
Well, the king cobra gets much bigger at 18 feet, and it's not a true cobra at all. It's in a little group of its own. There are a number of cobras that approach the 10-foot size range. There's a number that get to sort of around 8 foot, and you've got to remember these were size estimates. And it could have been a spitting cobra, because it's casting forth its venom.
How big do they grow?
Spitting cobras, the biggest one's about 7 or 8 feet.
Good God, I didn't know they got anywhere near that size. Because the only 2 people I know who encountered spitting cobras were you and my mum.
Mm.
You had glasses on, didn't you?
No.
No, my mum had glasses on, and the venom spat onto her glasses because they spit into the eye, don't they?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you had the same thing, but that was my mum in Nigeria back in the 1950s.
But Waverley Abbey is something different, in a totally different kettle of fish. Waverley Abbey is in Surrey, and the 27th of December last year, 10 people were at the Abbey in the evening on a ghost hunt. They weren't thinking about dragons. It could be nothing further from their mind. They were thinking about ghosts. And one of these people, who calls herself Dora, she said she was looking out towards some woods and she saw an immense winged creature. She said it had bat-like wings around 10 metres, that's 33 feet across, and it seemed to bank up over the woods, then fold its wings and dive down into the woods. Then almost immediately after, her and everybody else saw 2 smaller creatures, very similar but smaller, about 6 feet long. And these were described as having bat-like wings, ribbed bat-like wings, long heads, a long tail ending in the typical arrow-shaped tip. And these flew above the abbey. One landed on the ruins of the abbey and squatted there with its tail hanging down. Another one landed in a tree, and when they were looking at them without torchlight, they looked black, but when they shone a torch on them, their skin seemed to be silver in colour. And one woman I talked to, not Dora, a different woman, was very frightened. There was the one in the tree. She said she got the feeling it could just swoop down and kill her like that instantly. And then eventually these things both flew on again. But 10 people saw these all at once, and I interviewed 5 of them and got them to draw sketches. And I was impressed by the way they didn't exaggerate. They just told me what they'd seen. I mean, one guy said, I didn't get a good look at it, I only saw the wings, and they were like the wings of a bat, but enormous. Nobody talked about huge teeth or fiery breath or anything like that. They just said what they saw. If you want to support us and help us make more content like this, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, says, don't forget to ring the notification bell, otherwise you'll miss the new episodes.
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
They might be thinking about visiting the south. Well, there's things you need to know. The south might seem quaint, but remember, in the south, they drink shandy, they keep cats, they vote Tory, they go to focus groups, they go to wine bars, they're as soft as shite. So if you visit the south, remember, think once, think twice, think soft as shite.
That was a public information film.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the end of the show, and I hope you enjoyed it. I want to say big thank you to my guest this week, who was the ever-lovely Richard Freeman, and to my co-host this week in the co-pilot seat, it is the return of Miss Isabel.
Goodbye.
And there was Archie, but he's saying goodbye as well, except she's asleep. I'm going to be back on Wednesday and again on Saturday. What am I doing on Wednesday? I have no idea, but next Saturday we're going to have Richard Freeman and the gang back from Tajikistan with their new expedition report and footage and unboxing the trail cams and everything else. So, I'm going to be there on Saturday. Are you going to be there on Saturday, Mr. McCrennan?
I am indeed. Hurrah!
So, Mr. McCrennan, if you're going to be there on Saturday, Mr. McCrennan,
Yes, Mr. Jones.
then I'll be seeing you.